just have your blocks off to the side of your mat. And then we're going to start on our bellies today. So stack your hands or maybe your forearms on top of each other. And rest your forehead on your forearms or your hands. Tuck your toes under and just lift your hips and kind of wiggle your hips side to side. And then lower the hips down, feet about mat distance apart. And once you arrive, you can again just wiggle your hips side to side. Kind of noticing what you feel, noticing if you need to adjust your ribs or your shoulders so that you're more comfortable. And then when you feel you can relax, just let go of all the muscular tension holding you still. And start to feel your body. Sometimes lying on your belly can be uncomfortable. You might feel tension in different areas of your body than you do when you're lying on your back. So just make a note of where you feel the tension. And trying not to place judgment or question why, just kind of acknowledging it. And start to shift your awareness to your breath. So I'm always going to encourage a lighter, slower, longer breath. So oftentimes we're encouraged to breathe big, and that's fine in certain circumstances. But for here, try to keep your breath light. Breathing in and out through your nose and trying to keep that consistent as well. So always trying to breathe in and out through your nose. You may have times that you feel you need to mouth breathe, but trying to at least always inhale in and out through the nose, or in through the nose. And so as the breath enters in through the nose, start to feel where it moves into your body. In this position of lying on your belly tends to create the feeling as if you're able to move the side ribs and the back ribs with the breath. So feel the expansion of the rib cage out and backwards. So when the diaphragm is working properly, this side and back rib cage expansion should always happen to some degree. And just notice where you feel tension or gripping in the lower rib cage. And again, just be aware. And notice as you have started to concentrate on your breath, have you started to change your breath to try to make it fuller and bigger? And again, lighten your breath. Keep it slow and gentle, just sensing that subtle expansion of the lower ribs. And notice the automatic expansion of the belly towards the floor. So as we move through our practice today, I will refer to you to breathe into your back and side ribs. So acknowledge the feeling of what that feels like where it happens naturally so that you can try to reproduce that in positions where you might not naturally do that. It's this expansion of the back and side ribs that helps to create intra-abdominal pressure. It is what creates intra-abdominal pressure. And without the expansion, we have less of that gut pressure to support the spine. Slowly lift up onto your elbows and roll onto your side body, whatever side you're facing me with, so you can see. So rest on your hand. So rest your head on your hand. You can stretch your elbow out on the floor. We're going to start by aligning the knee, the ankle, the hip, and the shoulder. So trying to make everything in one plane. When we bring our legs forward, we're not challenging our core to hold ourselves up. So feeling everything in one plane. Draw the lower ribs in and down and expand into your side rib cage. You can keep your hands on the floor, or you can see what happens if you bring your hand to your hip, drawing your chin in towards your throat, lengthening the back of your spine, so making that spine nice and long. And start to bend the bottom leg forward. So whatever leg you have on the bottom, bend it forward. Top leg, the inner edge of your foot is on the floor. Heel is remaining in line with your hips. Press the inner edge of your foot down. Draw the lower ribs in. See if you can find that expansion of the ribs and bring your top hand to rest on the inside of your knee. And we're not necessarily pressing down, we're just using it to stabilize. Knee is in line with your hip, so your knee is bent at 90 degrees. And just start to take the foot off the floor, up and down. So if you're watching me, this may look like I make it really easy. I work on internal and external rotation quite frequently. As you begin to strengthen the muscles that create this internal and external rotation, this will become easier for you. So the next time you bring the foot up, take it as high up as you can and stop. Take the top hand, place it on the inside of your calf, wherever on your leg you can touch. You're going to press your fingers into your calf, and you're going to push your calf back into your fingers. So this is an isometric movement to start to create tension in your inner thighs. So we're creating that awareness of the adductor muscles to externally rotate your hip. The top foot is still pressing into the floor. Lower ribs are still in. And you're still breathing to find expansion in your rib cage. Release your hand and see if you can bring your foot up a little higher. It may lift a little higher. Take your hand and then bring it behind. So wrap it around the back of your calf to the outside of your calf, and now push the opposite way. So you're pushing your calf into your fingers and resisting your fingers into your calf. And notice where you feel that sensation in your hip. Top leg is still pressing down, ribs still drawing down towards the front of the hips. And you're still breathing into the side and back ribs. Release, and again, see if you can bring your foot up a little bit more. Slowly lower the leg down with control. Bend the top knee to rest on top of the bottom leg. Use your hands to press up and just take yourself over to the other side. So straighten the legs. Inner edges of your feet together. Bring the heels, the hip, and the shoulders all into one line. Notice if you're rocking forward or rocking back. Make sure the top hip is stacked on the bottom hip. Draw the lower ribs in and down. Expand into the ribs. Notice if you need your hand, where you can place it
to find a little bit more abdominal control. And then slowly bend your bottom knee forward so that your knee is in line with your hip. Your ankle's in line with your knee. Inner edge of your top foot presses down, keeping it all in that one line. Take your top hand, place it in the inside of your knee, and just start to rotate. So noticing that the rotation comes from inside the hip socket. So there's very little movement in the thigh and the lower leg. It's all from rotating inside the hip socket. You may notice a difference from one side to the other. The next time you rotate up, stay up. Take it as high up as you can, keeping the knee in line with the hip. Fingers come to the inside of your calf and start to push fingers into your calf and calf into your fingers. Notice where you feel the tension in your thigh. The tension is good here. We're engaging muscles that engage frequently, but not necessarily in external rotation. Release, see if you can open it or lift it a little higher. Wrap your hand behind your calf and bring the fingers to the outside of your calf and push in the opposite direction. Keep drawing the hip crease down. So you may feel that your bottom hip starts to hike up towards your ribs. Resist that. Release and see if you can bring it up a little higher. Release the leg to the ground. Stack your top knee on top of your bottom knee. We're going to use blocks for this. So have the blocks close to the middle of your mat and come onto your back. So if you only have one block is fine. Bring your heels in line with your sit bone, walking them as close to your hips as you can. Press your feet into the floor, lift your hips, and just rest your or set your block underneath your pelvis. So it's not supporting your lower back, it's supporting the pelvis, the hips. And then if you have the second block, press your feet into the floor, lift your hips, and bring the second block on top of the bottom block. You may have to adjust it a little higher towards your shoulder blades. Keep your left foot on the floor. Inhale, expand your rib cage. Keep the lower ribs drawing down, which is hard in extension, but keep it moving in that direction. And bend your right knee up. Inhale into the sides of the ribs, and as you exhale, bring your left knee up. Walk your shoulder blades back slightly and allow your lower ribs to fall towards the floor. They won't rest on the floor, but basically you're kind of taking your back a little bit out of extension. Hug your right knee towards your chest. Grab onto the front of your shin. Take your left foot towards the floor, and then you're moving in opposite directions. So the right knee is moving in towards the chest as much as you can, and then your left leg starts to straighten. The heel may or may not touch the floor. It doesn't really matter. So we're giving a little bit of a stretch to the psoas here, the hip flexors, and the left leg as we're actually deepening the right hip flexors. Take your right hip crease down, or you can think of reaching your right sit bone towards your left heel. So stabilize the hips, the pelvis. Inhale into your ribs, so expand out. And as you exhale, bend your left knee, bringing it to touch your left wrist if you can. Inhale. As you exhale, straighten the left leg, allowing the left heel to hover over the floor. So we're just going to do this a few more times. Inhale to support, and then as you exhale, move. So noticing how the inhale creates that intra-abdominal pressure so that when you start to move the leg, the pelvis can stabilize and stay still. The next time you take the leg long, hug the right knee a little further towards the chest, and you may feel your hips start to
fall off the back edge of the blocks, that's fine. Just allow the knee to come as close to your chest as you can and start to stretch your legs in opposite direction. Hip crease is still pulling down, sit bone is still reaching towards the left heel. You're reaching through your left heel to find that kind of expansion across the front of the hips. Bend the left knee. Bring both knees together and switch your hands to grip in front of your left shin. Start to take your right foot towards the floor, and if you can, straighten your right leg. In this straightened position, start to draw the left knee closer towards your chest, drawing the hip crease down, sit bone reaching towards your right heel. Inhale to expand the ribs. And as you exhale, bend the knee in. Inhale to expand the ribs out. Finding that gut pressure to find stability to straighten the right leg as you exhale. And do this a few more times. Really acknowledging how that use of diaphragmatic breathing helps to create a stable pelvis, helps to create a stable core so that you can move in a sense that has from stability. And the next time you stretch your leg long, hold it here. Keep deepening the left hip crease. Start to pull your left knee closer towards your left shoulder, allowing the top of the pelvis to kind of tip off the side of the block closer to the shoulders, almost lowering the shoulders closer to the floor. Start to stretch in opposite directions. Bend the right knee. Take the right foot to the floor. Take the left foot to the floor. Expand the ribs with your inhale. Lift the hips. Remove the blocks. And as you exhale, slowly lower the hips to the ground. Position yourself so that you have a slight lift of your lower back off the floor, but the lower ribs are still drawing down towards the hips. Bend your right knee in towards your chest, hug the knee towards your chest, and straighten your right leg long, or left leg long to the ground. Flex your ankles strongly, pulling your toes towards your shin. Feel the strength of the left leg, so stabilize. Right thumb comes into the hip crease to pull the hip crease down, reaching the tailbone towards the left heel. Notice if the lower back starts to press towards the floor and lift it slightly off the floor, keeping your natural curve. Start to pull your right knee towards your right shoulder. And as you do, feel your left heel start to shift towards your left hip. Allow that to happen. And then we're going to exaggerate. So take your left hand, grab your right ankle and pull it so that it's going towards your left hip. Take your right hand, place it on the inside of your knee and push your knee out. Start to push your knee into your hand as you push your ankle into your other hand. Relax your jaw, relax your tongue. Notice if you're trying to use those muscles to create more strength, and stop. And instead use the breath, so breathing into the ribs. And stop pressing. Keep your leg where it is and release your hand. So continue to try to push the knee out as you take the heel in. So using, again, an isometric movement to start to create stability in the hip. So this may be hard, just recognize that. Release, bring the knee back to center and hug the knee towards your chest. Notice if the lower back presses down, lift it up, and instead draw the lower ribs down. Take your left hand to the outside of your right knee, and without lifting your pelvis off the floor, just shift the knee towards midline. So if the hip lifts, just back off slightly. Left hand to the outside of your right knee. Start to press your hand and your knee together as you turn your foot out. So we're going into internal rotation. If the hip hikes on the right side, bring the hip down and only go as far as you can, pushing the foot out and the knee out.
Keep that and let your foot go. And then hug the knee in and just rotate in your hip socket. So let that strength go and now mobilize. And just notice what you feel in the hip and the opposite direction. Trying to keep the pelvis neutral and just keep the motion instead in the hip socket. Good. Release the right leg to the ground and slide the left knee in. Hug the front of the shin with the fingers. Notice if the low back presses down, lift it up, and instead draw the lower ribs down and in. Start to hug the knee towards the chest. Take the thumb into the left hip crease, pulling the hip crease down, reaching the sit bone towards your right heel. Right leg stays strong. And then slowly start to take the knee out to the left. Right hand reaches across and grabs the outside of your left ankle. Left hand comes inside the knee. We're going to take it as far into external rotation as we can by using the hands. So the right hand is pulling the heel towards you. The left hand is pushing the knee away from you. Right leg stays strong. Hips stay on the floor. Left hip is drawing down. So try not to hike up the hip. And then start to push your inner knee into your hand and your outer ankle into your other hand. Relax the jaw, relax the tongue, keep breathing. So only pushing enough that you can still breathe. And that you can breathe into that side and back rib expansion. Keep the leg where it is, release the hands. Try to use the muscles now to maintain that external rotation. Right leg is still pressing down into the floor. Release back to center. Pause for a second, pull the knee in, so let it go. And we'll go the opposite direction. So make sure left hip stays down. Start to take the knee across the midline as the foot turns out, only going as far, and it's minimal for me. I have very little internal rotation. So only going as far as you can, that your hip stays down and your hips stay on the floor. And then bring your left hand to the outside of your calf and your right hand on the inside, and press knee in and foot out. Relax the jaw, breathe into the ribs instead of the chest. So stay light, stay gentle. Release and hold. And then hug the knee in towards the chest and then roll it. So we go between this strengthening, this activation, and into the mobilization, just to access and to identify change. Move in the opposite direction. Good. Bend both knees, step the feet wide, so mat distance apart. Take the arms out from your body, T to the body, and just windshield wiper your knees side to side. So there's no control here. We're just kind of letting it go, giving our hips a break, giving them times to recalibrate, relax before we go back to working them again. And noticing if one side opens up a little bit more, if one side turns in a little bit more, just acknowledging that. And then roll onto whatever side faces me again. So this time, we're going to allow the knees to come slightly forward. Hips and shoulders are still in one line. Heels are in line with the hips, but the knees are bent and forward. Take your hand to your hip. Draw the lower ribs in. So instead of allowing them to flare up towards the chest, take them down towards the hips. Stabilize by breathing into the ribs, and keep your top hand on your hip. Keep your heels in the inner edges of your feet together, and just lift your right knee off, or your top knee off your bottom knee and down. So just go into this if you've ever done PT. You may have done clamshells before. Welcome.
to clamshells in movement. Next time you come up, stay up. Stabilize, so expand the ribs, lower ribs in. Take your top hand, press it down as you push up. So slightly different awareness here. Keep pushing up. Notice where you feel it in your hip. And notice if this is easy or if it's somewhat challenging. Let it go. Drop the top knee on top of the bottom knee. So they're stacked perfectly on top. Now we're going to go into internal rotation. So hips stay stacked, ribs down and in, expand. Lift the foot off the bottom foot and down. Lift. So just do this a few times. And noticing with this internal rotation, which is the opposite of external rotation, which is what we were doing the last time, notice which is easier for you. And for everybody, that's different. For me, external rotation is way easier. Lift and hold. And just keep pushing your knee down, like squeezing them together as you push your heel up as much as you can. Notice where you feel this in this region of your body, in the hips. Bring the foot to rest on top. We're going to combine these two things. So make sure you're still stable. Shoulder and hips are in alignment, hips stacked, ribs. Lift, so clamshell. Keep your knee there and lift your foot higher than your knee. Touch feet, touch knees. Lift knee, lift foot, lift knee, or touch foot, drop knee. So one more time, lift, keep the knee where it is, rotate from the hip socket to lift the top foot. Notice if you're hiking the hip up, take it down. So the top foot is pushing up as the knee is rotating towards the bottom knee. Lower the foot, lower the knee, press up and switch. So shoulder and hips are in alignment. Knees are stacked. You may notice that your top knee wants to come back a little bit. Shift it forward so they're stacked. That means the hips are stacked. Lower ribs in, expand into the sides of the rib cage. Flex your ankles, and we're just going to clamshell on this side. And notice if there's a difference. Like this side is way harder for me. If it is harder, notice where you feel it. And there's no judgment there, just kind of a recognition. You may start to notice some of your cheats. You should feel this in the outer hip. I happen to feel it in my inner thigh. So that just tells me, maybe that's something that has not been great lately. Bring it up. Take the top hand, place it on top of your outer thigh and press. Notice if you still have your core, notice what happens to the hips. Are you hiking that top hip up towards your ribs? Draw it down so it's directly on top and release. And we'll go the opposite. Make sure the knees are together and take the bottom or the outer edge of your foot up and out as the bottom of your foot goes up towards the sky. So you stay on that dorsiflexion or just flexion if that's easier. Notice where you feel this. So you may feel some action in your inner hips. You may feel some action in your outer hips as well. Next time you lift, stay up, hips stay stacked, lower ribs in. You're breathing into the side ribs. Keep pushing the knee, the top knee into the bottom knee as you lift the outer foot higher. Notice if you start to roll forward and come back into that neutral. Bring the feet together. Let's put these together. So clamshell, keep the knee where it is. The rotation comes in the hip to lift the top foot. So the knee kind of rotates down. Feet together, knee drops. Lift. Keep the knee where it is. Rotate from the hip socket to bring the foot up. Keep the knee where it is. Rotate the feet together and bring it down. One more time. Rotate. Keep the knee where it is. It turns, top of the knee turns down
Hips stay stacked, foot lifts. This is hard, especially if you haven't been doing this abductor adductor work. Feet together, knees together. Roll back onto your belly. You're going to need a block. We're going to come into child's pose just to give the hips a bit of a break. So toes tuck, knees wide. Send your hips back towards your heels. Before you come down onto your head, walk your hands forward, spread your hands, press your hands forward and down. Feel the hips track in the opposite direction. And then start to reach your sit bones even further back as you deepen the front of your hip creases. And then slowly walk your hands forward, either resting your forehead on your stacked hands or just resting the forehead on the floor. So you know your typical child's pose. Notice what you're feeling in this child's pose. So as we start to engage or activate, as we start to create motor control in the muscles and other structures that stabilize our hips, you may start to notice that your hips open considerably. We haven't done a lot of stretching. All of this has been activation, but notice your hips. And then slowly shift forward and come back down onto your belly. So this is a super fun one. And just a warning, when I say it's super fun, you might not find it so fun. So take your block in your right hand. Rest your forehead on your left hand. Tuck your toes under and just kind of wiggle your hips side to side as you lift your hips off the floor, just to create more space in the front of the belly, and then point the toes again. You're going to press extra strong into your left foot. So feeling the left foot press down, the left thigh press down. Start to reach your tailbone towards your right foot as you peel your pubic bone towards your ribs. Keep that left leg activated as you start to bend your right knee. You're going to take your block. You may have to lift your head to watch this. Take your block and press it on your heel. And then you're going to take the other end of the block so it's at its tightest. And you're going to put that on your thigh. And right away, you might start to feel some cramping. Awesome. That means that you're actually working muscles that maybe don't work so much. Then bring your head back to your hands. Press the left foot down, press the left thigh down. Reach the tailbone as you peel your pubic bone up towards your ribs. As you exhale, lift your belly off the floor. And as you inhale, lift the knee, the right knee off the floor. That's even more fun. Release it down. Press left foot down, leg strong, belly engaged, lift right knee. Lower down. One more time. Press down, lift right knee. Keep the left leg strong and release. Reach behind, release the block, let the leg go. Oh, so much fun. Use the hands underneath your shoulders to press up to hands and knees. Tuck the toes under and press back to down dog. So give that hamstring a nice stretch. If you were here last week, think of the hip hinge. So firming the front of the thighs and rotating the pelvis forward. Expansion of the back and side ribs. We've got another side. Lower down onto your knees. And then lower down onto your belly. So rest your forehead on your right hand. Right leg is strong. Bend the left knee. Take the block, place it between your heel and your thigh, or your heel and your glute, if it doesn't go to your thigh. And then stack your forehead on both hands. Right foot, thigh, press down. Pubic bone reaches up towards your ribs. Tailbone reaches towards your heels. Inhale into your side ribs. And lift your left knee off the floor. Hello, hamstrings. Nice to meet you. Release.
Right leg strong, pubic bone up, tailbone reaches down. Inhale, side of the ribs, lift the leg and exhale. Lower down. One more time, press the foot, reach tailbone, pubic bone lifts. Inhale, side ribs, and lift. Keep the right leg strong. Lift the left knee more. Release. Whew. Release the block. Take it off to the side, hands underneath your shoulders. Press up through hands and knees. Tuck your toes under, and again, stretch out your hamstrings. Down dog. Lift high up onto your toes. Bend your knees. Press your leg bones to the back of your hip sockets. Keep pressing them back as you start to straighten your legs. Heels do not have to come to the floor. Firm the front of your thighs, so engage the muscles in the front of your thighs and notice the length we've created in the hamstrings by first activating the hamstrings. Lower the knees to the floor and come back down onto your belly. So this time we're going to stack our hands head on our hands, but we're going to make a little prop. So you're going to interlace your fingers and touch your thumbs together. You're going to rest your pinky on the mat, and you're going to rest your forehead in that circle that you've created with your fingers and your thumbs. So pinky edges on the floor, fingers interlaced, thumbs touch, making that little almost heart shape. And then rest your forehead in that. Press the pinky edges of your hands into the floor and see if you can open the space between your shoulder blades. So instead of squeezing your shoulder blades together, do the opposite. So you may think about reaching your elbows in opposite directions. So we're slightly active here. Left leg stays down. Bend your right knee out like a frog. So knee comes maybe as high as the hip, maybe not, only taking it as high as you can. Keep the knee on the floor and lift your foot and your inner calf off the floor. So we're in internal rotation. Staying in internal rotation, start to slide the thigh back down, knee stays bent. And then turn your heel towards your left thigh, knee out as you slide back into that frog position. Lift the shin and foot off the floor and slide the knee down. So we're going through that full rotation here. So the knee comes out, foot comes down, frog. Foot lifts, internal rotation as we go back down, knees together. One more time. Drop the right heel towards the left thigh, external rotation to slide it out, frog. Lift the foot and slide it back down. So we're going to do it one more time just to feel the feeling. Notice what it feels like in the hip socket. So right foot falls towards left thigh. Slide the knee out to the side, foot comes down, so external rotation. Foot comes up, internal rotation, and take it back down. Straighten the leg. Hands underneath the shoulders and press up to tabletop. Hands underneath your shoulders, knees below your hips, press down through your hands and twist out. So stabilizing the upper body. We have a slight low back curve. So we're in neutral, which the low back is concave. So it has a slight curve. Bring the lower ribs in. So bring the lower ribs in towards each other and then reach them towards the pelvis. Inhale into the ribs and bend your right knee and take it slightly behind your left knee. So kicking your heel towards your hip and then flex your ankle. So keeping everything where it is. Just start to rotate the foot out and in.
So you're taking the foot all the way out to the right, and then taking it all the way, maybe touching your left leg. Notice the rotation in the hip socket. Notice if you're hiking your right hip up towards your ribs to create more motion, and stop that. Keep it all in the hip joint. Good. Bring it back to center, tuck both toes under. Bring the knees together, stabilize by inhaling, lower ribs out and in, low back curve. Keep the pelvis where it is and just lift the knees straight out to the side. So we're in external rotation here. Notice if you've hiked the hip up, bring it down. Then we're gonna do what we did on the floor. So take the foot towards the sky, knee starts to rotate down. Take it back, and then draw it towards the midline. So bringing it towards your chest. From here, lift it back out to the side. So external rotation. Start to take the foot up, knee down, internal rotation. Take it back and draw it back through center. We're gonna go the opposite direction. So take the foot back. Start to take the knee out, foot draws towards left hip, and then take it out to the side and bring it towards the midline and through. One more time, take it back. Minimal movement in the hips. It's all in the hip socket, not the movement of the pelvis. Take the knee out, external rotation. You may feel it in your other hip too, so that's what we're creating, a stabilization. Bring the knee down, cross right knee back, so straighten the right leg back, and then cross it behind your left thigh. Start to walk your hands back and just send your hips back. You may or may not bring them back to the floor. So we're just getting a little stretch here. So it's all fine and dandy that we are like increasing that circumduction inside the hip, that rotation. We need to be able to internally and externally rotate and abduct and adduct. Like those are necessary movements as well as flexion and extension. But the main reason we need them is for stabilization. So come back up to hands and knees, uncross your legs. If you have a block and you want to challenge, you can bring the right foot up to the block. Lean down, and as you do, pull that hip crease down. Hands come to the floor, and you're just gonna come up to standing. So your right foot is resting on your block. If this becomes too challenging, if balance is a challenge, just take the block out. Press down through your right foot and lift your left foot off the floor. So hands are on your hips. We're gonna lean the weight. So push the hip out and then use your hand to push it back in. Push the hip out, push it back in. So this is what we are meant to do. We're meant to use these muscles to stabilize the hip inside the socket. So we are training these muscles to work so that they can do their job. So hopefully you can feel that kind of combination of how we've created that. Come up, really stabilize. So squeeze the outer hip, inner thighs working, hips stay in neutral. Take the left knee forward. Again, if this gets to be too much, come off the block. It's harder. It makes you use more of those stabilizing muscles. Bring the knee out to the side. So we're going into external rotation. Take the foot back and bring it through center. So we're doing the same thing, making circles in the hip socket while we're stabilizing with the leg we just worked. Switch directions. Knee out, bring it back in. Last time. Good. Bend the knee, step down, and come back onto your belly. Rest your forehead on your hands flat.
Bend both knees and windshield wiper your knees side to side. So let the hips wiggle. Let all the work we just did go. And then bring both of your feet out and cross your ankles. This is really good for your low back and your sacrum. So now the legs are moving in the same direction. So you're kind of combining that internal and external rotation and switching which shin goes in front as you cross. Good. Let's do the other side. So interlace your fingers the opposite way. So the opposite pinky finger is on the bottom. Bring the thumbs to touch. Press the pinky edges of your hands together as you rest your forehead in that hole. You're going to press down through your elbows and almost as if you're trying to stretch your elbows apart to stretch between the shoulder blades. Lower ribs kind of gently drawing away from the floor. Right foot continues to press into the floor. Start to bend your left knee out to the side, frog. And then keep the knee on the floor, lift the foot and the shin. Just keep the foot lifted as you bring the leg back to touch right thigh, maybe not touch. And then start to drop the foot towards your right thigh as you slide the knee back out into frog. Once you're in frog, lift the left leg, slide the legs back together. Notice how much your pelvis, keep doing this. Notice how much your pelvis, the side of your hip, starts to hike up towards your ribs as you bring it into frog, and try to minimize that. It will happen to a degree, but try to minimize it. Last time. Slide the leg up, lift the foot and the shin, and then slide it back down. So remember how that felt, because we're going to recreate that on tabletop. So bring the hands underneath your shoulders and press up into tabletop. Hands underneath your shoulders, press down and twist your hands out. So stabilizing upper body. Knees underneath your hips. Slight curve of your lower back. So keeping the natural curve of your lower back. Engage your diaphragm by inhaling out into the side and back ribs. Bring the left knee slightly behind your right knee. Kick the heel towards your hip and just find that movement inside the hip socket first. So taking the foot in and out, feeling the leg bone twist in the opposite direction. Notice how much you're moving your hips and try to minimize that so that the only rotation you feel is in the hip socket. And come back to center, tuck both toes under. We're going to go into external rotation first. So stabilize pelvis. Inhale to stabilize core. Keep the hips where they are and just lift the left knee out to the side. Shin is kind of perpendicular to the floor. Start to take the knee back and bring it through. Take the knee out to the side. Start to take the foot up towards the sky as you turn the knee down. Take it back. And then move through flexion as you draw the knee in towards the chest. Go the opposite direction. So extend. Start to turn the foot in as you turn the knee out. Bring the knee out to the side, forward, and then take it back. Stabilize the pelvis as you turn foot in, knee out, come back through. Bring the knees together. And then draw left leg back. Cross it behind your right thigh. Bring the feet out as you press yourself back. I always find it really fascinating how different both sides are, my right side and my left side. My mind automatically rushes to think about why, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that we can work towards creating more symmetry, although symmetry will probably never be possible, but moving more towards creating something close to symmetry. Shift forward. Take your block out in front of you.
Bring your right leg through, come up onto your knees, and then step your left foot onto your block. Draw the left hip crease down. So you're using the muscles of your outer hip that we've been working on to be what pulls, almost as if it's wrapping the leg bone into the hip socket and drawing it into it. Then lean forward, bring your hands to the floor, press down, keep drawing the outer hip down. So use it to stabilize, and then press up. So find where your weight is balanced on your block, and then come off your right foot. So you're balancing on the foot on your block. You're gonna press the hip out, so let it sag, and then use the muscles to hug it back in. You also wanna use the core muscles, so that expansion of the diaphragm helps to create that core stability that helps to stabilize us and balance. And when you're talking, you're not doing that, so. Next time you come up, hold, really hug the hips in, bring the pelvis into neutral, bring the right knee forward. Turn the foot in, knee out, take it out to the side, find internal rotation, bring it through. So we really have to fight to stabilize. External rotation, take it out, internal rotation, opposite way. Take it back, knee out, heel in, take it around. One more time. Notice how your balance is with all this work. Have you improved that? Let your foot go. Release. Move the block. Shake out the legs. Let's do a forward fold. So inhale, reach your arms over your head. Bend your knees forward as you send your hips back. So we're going back to that hip hinge. Lower belly towards your thighs. Bending your knees enough to bring your hands to the ground. Feet are about hip distance apart. Outer edges of your feet parallel. Find your inner thigh muscles, and almost as if you're trying to seal your inner thighs or suck your inner thighs towards your pubic bone. See if you can create that sensation in your inner thighs. And then find your outer hips and pull the outer hips back. Inhale. As you exhale, start to straighten your legs as you can. You may find that you have a little bit more length in your hamstrings, a little bit more length in your hips, opening in your hips. Let your hips lean back. So finding your center of gravity, your rib cage, kind of in the middle of your feet. So oftentimes we're told to keep our hips stacked above our heels. I'm going to say lean back so that your center of gravity is directly above your feet. Let your head hang, let your spine round. Find again that expansion of the breath into the side and back ribs. Notice what happens if you firm the front of your thighs a little bit more. And bring the hands to the floor, lift up halfway, lower down onto your knees. Cross your ankles. Bring your hands behind your back. Bring the feet out in front, knees bent. Arms out. Inhale into your ribs. Find that gut pressure. And with a long spine, slowly let the air seep out. Once the lower back touches, roll one vertebrae down at a time. Step your feet mat distance apart. Windshield wiper your legs again. So knees stay bent, windshield wiper side to side.
Bring the knees back to still. Press your feet into the floor. Lift your hips and shift your hips slightly to the left. Straighten the right leg long to the ground. Hug your left knee, drawing it a little closer towards your right shoulder. And keep your right hand on the outside of your left knee and twist. Bringing the right knee, if it can, rest on the floor. Or if you prefer, you can stack a block underneath your left knee. You can stay here, or you can bend your right knee, kicking your heel towards your hip, taking your left hand to catch the inner edge of your right foot and wrapping around to kind of come into this lovely twist. And we'll kind of show off your nice open hips. And then just breathe. Noticing if you can take full breaths into your rib cage. And if you can't, adjusting so that you still can. Our intention is to create more space in the diaphragm. So if we twist to the extent of not being able to breathe, we're kind of defeating the purpose. Release your bottom foot or the back foot, straighten that leg, and rotate back to center. Knees bent, feet on the floor. Lift the hips, shift them slightly to the right. Straighten your left leg. Bend your right knee towards your left shoulder, grabbing with your left hand, and then slowly twist. Knee either resting on the floor or a block, dependent on how well you can breathe into your diaphragm. Then kick your left heel towards your left hip as you reach behind with your right hand and grab the inner edge of your foot, top of the foot. And breathe. So feeling expansion in your diaphragm, keeping it light, keeping it slow, and keeping it gentle. And release. Straighten your bottom leg. Twist back to center. Hug both knees towards your chest. Rock a little side to side. Rocking to either side to press yourself up in a seated position. And instead of Shavasana, just going to take a few breaths in Baddha Konasana. So bring the soles of your feet together. Bring your heels as close to your pelvis as you can. Slowly start to fold forward and just going to the point of comfort. So we're not using this as a stretch. We're just using it more as a place to kind of settle in, just kind of noticing our work. Noticing if you've created more space. Noticing where there's still tension. You can return to this again and again. Each time you work on this internal and external isometrics, you will be amazed at the stability that you create in your hips, but also more mobility, freedom, less pain and tension. Press down through your hands to come up. Reach underneath your knees, bring your knees together. And we are done. Thank you.